Welcome to a Virginia Reports conversation. I'm Lexi Solomon, and today I'm chatting with 2019 Virginia Tech graduate Caitlin Dickson, who was recently evacuated from serving in the Peace Corps in Fiji due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Along with thousands of other volunteers, her life plans have turned upside down, and she's now facing the same question as millions of other young Americans: what do I do now? But I'll let her introduce herself a little more and tell you more about that.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Dickson. As Lexi stated, I graduated in 2019, and in August of 2019, I chose to serve in the Peace Corps. And so I was sent to Fiji to work as a youth development volunteer. So our main project was supporting the youth and having them learn life skills and teaching them healthy living and stuff like that.
So can you tell me when you first found out about the COVID-19 pandemic?
I was just talking with someone in Fiji, and they're like, "Have you heard about this virus, this COVID-19 virus?" I was like, "No, like I'm so cut off from the world. I don't really have cell service that's consistent, so I didn't really check my messages often. Um, and so that was the first time I heard of it. I had no clue what it was, just that is some virus that started in China, and then I quickly learned what it was.
When, do you know, about what time that was? Like March, like early March, or when was that?
I think I'd say it was no, early March, yeah, when I first started hearing about it. Um, I didn't know too much. I was pretty cut off.
And when you first learned about this, did you have any idea, did it ever cross your mind that you could possibly be evacuated, or did you think you would probably just stay in Fiji?
So when I got the official news from Peace Corps, it was on a Monday. I was supposed to have my language class with a Fijian in the village, and he was to help me learn the language, but then my phone randomly got signal, and it's from our director in Peace Corps in Fiji saying, you should start packing your bags. We don't have any specific details yet, but you should just kind of start getting ready to go. We don't really know when you'll be leaving. Um, and so I guess let me backtrack. The first email I got was we had the choice to stay or not. And so I was on the phone with my parents being like, we got this email on Saturday. I was supposed to tell them Monday business time, so 5 p.m. if I wanted to stay in Fiji or go home because of the COVID-19 virus. And I was on the phone with my parents being like, hey, I want to stay. Is that crazy? Like, that's my gut reaction. Like, I don't really want to go home. I feel safer here in Fiji than going to the US. And then once I was like, we're all on the same page, like, yeah, stay. That makes sense. Go for it. Then I got the email saying, just kidding, you don't have a choice. Pack your bags. We don't know when you're leaving, but tell everyone in your community, like, you'll be going because of the virus and stuff like that.
So from what I understand, the evacuation process was obviously kind of hectic. Can you share a little more about what that was like and what you went through?
Yeah, it was definitely the hardest goodbye. It was very fast. It was pretty much Monday afternoon is when I found out I had to pack my bags. Monday evening is when I figured out I'd be leaving Wednesday, like my island Wednesday. So I live on an outer island to get to the main island to meet the rest of the Peace Corps volunteers. And there's only one ferry that leaves each day. So I left Wednesday morning. The bus is supposed to come around 4:30 a.m., but I caught it at 5 a.m. And then from there, like the bus drives onto the ferry, and then the ferry drives to like the mainland in Fiji. And then the same bus that you rode to get on the ferry is the same bus you take off the ferry, and it drives you to Suva, which is where I met Peace Corps. So Wednesday 5 a.m. is when I left, and Monday around 3 p.m. is when I found out that I'd be leaving and didn't know when though. So it was like less than 36 hours of telling my key counterparts, so who I work with in the school, and then they call it TK, which is like the village spokesperson, and telling him and then other friends in the village that I'd be leaving. I don't know when, but soon. Um, it was really fast. I don't know, and it was chaotic. And so like Tuesday was like my one full day, and that's when I had to go to town and buy my ferry ticket back to Suva. and going to town takes a lot longer than like going to town in the US. Like you have to catch they call it lorries, which is pretty much just like a big truck with seats, like bench like seats in the back. And it takes like 30-40 minutes to drive to town, but it's not like consistent. It's not like every day 8 a.m. this time you catch it. You just kind of have to hope and like wait between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. you catch it. So then I spent like the first half of the day in town buying the ticket. They have this thing called kava, where like when you first come to a village, you present it. It's in like a cornucopia like shape, and like you present it, and they do their ceremonial thing. But then you also do it when you leave. So then I bought that as well, and like some last second gifts, and then came back. And then my friend, Kate, she is super sweet, love her to death. She was also another Peace Corps volunteer, but she was in the US at the time for different reasons. And so I went to her house, spending like my afternoon on the phone with her, being like, hey, what do you want me to bring home for you? Since you have no, like, she doesn't have an option to come back and get the stuff she wants. So it's kind of like really rushed because I had to like do things like buy the ticket. I wanted to like get the stuff for my friend, and then it was like early evening, like 4 or 5 p.m. before I got back and could start packing on Tuesday. And then people in Fiji are super sweet, and they like surprised me with a last second like feast where I sat at the head of the table, which I felt uncomfortable because that's for like the chief, like the top guest. But since I was the one leaving, like they had me sit at the head. I was like, whoa, this is weird, but like very sweet, like very sentimental. Where they said nice words, and it's common to give speeches. So like they said nice words on my behalf, and then I like said sensible things, thanking them for like having me, getting the house ready, dealing with my shenanigans, like stuff like that. And then kind of celebrated drinking smash juice with the kids, which is like a powder drink. It's kind of like pretty much sugar that you pour in water and mix it. That's about it. It tastes really good. And then with the adults, I drink their like kava drink. So I don't know. It's kind of really fast of like getting things I had to do to prepare to leave, kind of throwing stuff in bags, packing, and then celebrating at the end while I could. And then some people stayed up, and a good amount of people stayed up and waited for me for the bus to come pick me up. And they have this farewell song, and it's called the Isolé song, which is pretty much heartbreaking to hear. And they sing it. I kind of appreciate the comic relief, but they sing it twice, thinking it was the bus, and it's just like a car. It's like, ha. And then the third time, like it got me. It's like, oh no, this is too much. But it was super sweet. People were definitely judging me getting on the bus, like full of tears. They're like, what is happening? This Kavalangi, which just pretty much means foreigner, it's just like on this bus crying, but it's fine.
So I can imagine like going through all of that and not really having a lot of time to process that you were leaving in such, such an awful way, honestly. What was the culture shock like coming back? How have you been adjusting with that?
Right. I definitely did not process anything. I was in like a sleep deprived state, maybe like 3 hours of sleep between the 2 days. Um, it was weird coming back when I first landed in LA before I had my layover to go back to DC. Because at that point, COVID kind of hit the US, I'd say, not as much as it is today. But I came back on March 18th, and it was weird because the airport in LA was empty. I went through security and everything. I want to say 10 minutes. Like there weren't really lines. The lines are like the people on my flight. Um, it was weird, but it was really nice because one of our Peace Corps volunteers, who was also in the US earlier for different reasons, surprised us with like sweets and snacks and like a sign being like welcome back. Is really sweet, so that made it not feel as weird. But then I chose to self quarantine for 2 weeks in a hotel. So the first night, because I came back late, I like dropped everything off at my parents' house, but then the next day I went in quarantine in the hotel. I was just like very jet lagged, in a like foggy, groggy state. So the times I was awake were like, I go to bed around I think 5 a.m., 6 a.m. And like I'd wake up around like, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 p.m. But it was convenient because the times I was up were super early in the morning, where most people are like asleep because of the time difference in Fiji. My friends in Fiji were just messaging me over Facebook, so it kind of helped. It helped with adjusting with it. But
Yeah, well, it's nice to like have people kind of help you with the culture shock a little bit if you can still like keep that tether to back where you were for sure. But what are things looking like for you right now? Like, do you know if you're going to be able to go back or when you might be able to go back?
yeah, so Peace Corps recently shared an announcement to all evacuees, like only evacuees, saying that for the end of May, just like take the time to think if you want to reinstate. There's like two options. You can reinstate, which means you go back to your country of service, but there's no guarantee that you get your same site placement. And then option two is you can re-enroll. So that's where you would do Peace Corps all over again with the training and the full 27 months in a new country. And so you can choose like which route you want to take, or if you don't want to reapply, then obviously that's fine too. And they said that they have those applications out, I think sometime in the summer. I haven't looked too much into it. I just kind of read the blurb. But I know that they're trying to get us back. And they said the expected date or earliest expected date now is September 2020. So they're trying.
Yeah. So if you reinstate, does that mean that your service would end when it was originally supposed to, or are you still going to get the full 27 months?
Right. So when I left, that was like another part. Like once I met all the Peace Corps volunteers, it's called COS, which means close of service. So my time, like my 27 months I was supposed to serve in Fiji ended for me 19 months earlier. For others, it was 6 months. Like it just depends when you first came. Since it's a 2-year commitment, there's people from the year before me who are like about to finish the second year. And then some people choose to do third year. So like everyone was there for a different amount of time. But we all ended our service early. So if I were to reinstate, it would be like starting again, like a second tour, like another service, but for a shortened time since we wouldn't have to go through as much training because we know the culture more than before we came to Fiji.
So even if you do decide to go back, you wouldn't be leaving till around September. So do you have any plan for what you might want to do in that period in between?
Yeah, right now I'm Peace Corps volunteers, like I was considered a Peace Corps volunteer. And then when you come back, it's called RPCV, which is Return Peace Corps Volunteer. And they have a bunch of groups. So I'm like part of the Northern Virginia area. They call it an affiliate group through the, I think, National Peace Corps Association. That sounds right, NPCA. And so I joined the Nova group, and they just had like a happy hour. I had no clue what I was walking into, but they're all super sweet and super nice. And they like helped me with career mentoring. So I've actually been talking with a Return Peace Corps volunteer in Nova, and she's been helping me out with that. And so I've been applying for volunteer jobs that are kind of like short term, so that I don't waste, because I have about 5-6 months in between when I could potentially go back, and I don't want to just kind of sit here. And luckily from tech, I majored in technology, which is you can do that pretty much virtually. Like you don't have to go to site, which is nice.
Yeah.
So I've just been applying for virtual jobs with technology for companies I'm interested in. And I'm really passionate about the environment, so I've been applying to like environmental groups, but like using technology. I don't know. It's kind of been fun and exciting, being excited about that stuff. But that's where I'm at, kind of making my resume and sending out applications for volunteer jobs. And I've also doing full time just because I don't want to bank on Peace Corps, like saying that they'd come back when they would, if that makes sense. Just because with COVID, you don't really know like when it'll be safe again to travel.
Definitely. How would you say that this experience has kind of made you reevaluate or look at your life plans in a different way?
Um, so I'm doing this very early. I thought I figured this stuff out in like 2 years, but I'm doing it now. Um, I would say it's pretty much. At first, I was really annoyed. I was just in the process of starting my projects and getting excited in Fiji, and then having to stop is really annoying. But it's been nice to have the time to like think and like figure out what I want to do. Um, And so I've told like my family, like friends, like my biggest, I guess, insecurity of my resume is my work experience. And this gives me the time and opportunity to get work experience and do it in fields I'm interested in. Um, Instead of just going down like the typical path that like BIT majors go down at tech, if that makes sense. Um, so it's kind of been nice just to like figure out what I want to do and like kind of just go for that instead of being like stuck in like a like this kind of like tunnel and like looking that way. Um, it is annoying having to start over and like reevaluate everything, but I kind of also like the time because I can gain a little bit more experience and skills before going back in if that's what I choose, or it can just help me with whatever I end up doing later. I'm not sure. It
Yeah.
can go both ways.
Yeah. Well, given your time that you spent in Fiji and the experience you had with the people there, how would you say that you might think that the pandemic might impact Fiji or might, I guess, reshape life for Fijians in a way that might be different from the US? Like, how do you think it will hit them differently? Like, what's your take based on the time that you had there?
Um, they're a very communal community, I guess, of people there. So the day I left is the day that they got their first case. And I think they have 18 now, maybe more. But the last I heard was 18. And so Fiji made it a lot stricter for what they could do. So they have curfew. And depending on like the first person they found was in Latoka, which is in the main island. And so they shut down that city and made it so that you can't travel. And then other places you couldn't travel. And the gatherings was probably the hardest effect that I had on Fijians because I think I've mentioned to you before how like Fijians drink kava, like grog. And so that's like a big circle where you share like the same cup with easily like 8 to 20 people. Like it can be as I don't know, it's a lot of people that you share like the same cup with. And so they had to make rules being like you can't meet in groups of it was like 5 or 8 people or more. And like they couldn't go to church and church was such a big part of their culture. And because that's a large group of people, like that really affected them where they're like they had to stay home instead of going to church or like they do things in big groups, I guess. I didn't realize how often they did it, so that's how it affected them, I'd say. Mainly all the communal gatherings.
And it sounds like you've been in touch with some of the friends that you made back in Fiji. So, how would you say that they're handling things in comparison to your friends here in the States?
That's a good question. I would say, well, since I've been here, they also had a pretty strong cyclone hit Fiji. So their priorities kind of shifted from like following COVID-19 rules to just safety, like literally surviving a cyclone. Some parts of the island didn't get hit as bad, but others houses got like completely demolished. So like parts of Fiji, they have to like, pick theirs back up and grow from that and redevelop everything. So I know there's a focus on just trying to like figure out what I guess assessing what has to be fixed after that. And I know Australia and New Zealand helped with relief packages for that. Um, I would say I don't know, there's kind of memes that go around saying like if you drink this or if you do this, then you'll be cured. And I know people joke about that. So I know like Fijians like to laugh a lot and they try and put humor in things during like even though it's a serious thing like a pandemic, they still try and laugh. They love to talk and laugh. So that's kind of how they keep their spirits up during this.
Yeah, and I guess my last question for you would be, what do you feel like is the biggest takeaway or maybe the best lesson you learned from having to evacuate and leave Fiji behind so quickly?
Um, it's really just community. Like I know I was thousands of miles away from my home back here in DC, but even though I was so far away, I really appreciated all the people I met. They made me feel welcome living in their village because I was the only volunteer in that village. And even though I was scared and terrified of bugs, like even with something as silly as that, they'd help me out. Like they're always wanting to lend a helping hand. People would stop by and just bring me food. Maybe because the first day I burned rice, which wasn't the best. But like they're like genuinely cared for me, which is really sweet. And it didn't have to be anything fancy, like obviously back here in the US, the quality or like standard of living is higher, but that like I didn't really care about that. It's just that sense of belonging and the sense of community was really nice. And so I really appreciated that. That's kind of wherever you go can find that, you're set.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. It was great talking to you. And thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for more conversations like this in the future.